It's wonderful to be here together with everyone as we sort of make sense of a really complicated situation around the world for civic groups from Africa, Asia, the US, Europe, Latin America, the Middle East at a time when the world is changing very quickly, but also the institutional underpinnings are shaping and shifting beneath the sands that civic groups are facing, particularly, not exclusively, but particularly accelerated by sudden cuts to U.S. Support and partnerships with those organizations. For those who don't know me, my name is Mike Jobbins. I'm the Vice President of Global Affairs and Partnerships here at Search for Common Ground. We're an international conflict resolution and peace building organization with about 55 offices in 35 countries around the world. And today we're really pleased to partner with the Accountability Lab, which, for those who don't know it, is a leading global translocal network with the aim of making governance work for citizens and supporting active leaders, accountable institutions, and working towards a goal where the world's resources are used wisely and decisions benefit everyone. Can't imagine a better partner to be working with. And we're joined with one of their real leaders, Doussouba Konate, who leads Accountability Lab in Mali and has been a real champion for good governance and civic growth and civic engagement over many, many years. And she'll be joining us in a second from Accountability Lab. The other civil society leader who's going to be joining us is Nawaz Mohammed, who's been very active at leading civic efforts in Sri Lanka throughout the reconciliation and inclusive governance and historical memory process. He's a leader with Search for Common Ground and someone who has seen the ebbs and flows, the ups and downs of the struggle for a more healthy, safe, and just society in Sri Lanka. So I'm really pleased to have these two leaders, but particularly to be having this conversation because here in Washington, there's often, in many ways, the world already feels to have moved on. I'm joining from Washington. We have people joining from around the world. The conversation in many ways has moved on or focused on aid cuts, on the job losses attached to aid cuts, on geopolitics, on the radical changes within our society in the US and around the world. But the impact that aid cuts have had in the different societies around the world often get lost. And to the extent there's a focus, it's been a focus on humanitarian aid, a focus on some of the life-saving assistance, HIV/AIDS, all of which have had a very real and devastating effects. But at the same time, there's a wider set of organizations and a wider sector that really, in many ways, is feeling a great deal of pressure of delivering more while at the same time being resourced significantly less. So I'll give the floor in just a second to Doussouba to share some of the exciting work that and really landmark work. Exciting might be the wrong word, but some of the real landmark work that Accountability Lab has done in documenting the effects of aid cuts. They've interviewed more than 1,000 organizations. They've collected the effects around the world, both of everything that's been lost and the effects on communities, but also everything that remains and everything the way that civic groups are adapting, responding, pivoting away from a lot of the sort of support that no longer exists, but to shape social change efforts and continue the mission that everyone has been called to as a vocation. So I'll give the floor to Doussouba, but before I do, just some quick ground rules. This is a session that's being recorded. It is going to be a session that's on the record, so it will be available online for those who can't join us today. So bear in mind that as we have our conversation. This is being held in a webinar style format on Zoom. So for those who aren't so familiar with the platform, you should feel free to comment either to everyone in the chat box, but you can also direct message people by selecting the to button. It should be a blue button in your drop down if you want to message people privately, reconnect with old friends and colleagues. Because it's being recorded, I'd encourage people not to share personal contact information in the overall chat. That'll be shared and that may be online. But you feel free to share your contact information, emails, and so forth privately. Throughout our conversation today, though, do feel free to share thoughts, things that echo resources that your own organization has done on this topic or that might be relevant. So please feel free to have a sidebar conversation with the understanding that's going to be part of the sort of the permanent public sort of record and discussion from this. Some of you might have gotten an invitation that had an hour and a half time slot. We are going to keep it to an hour, which is sort of the allotted time. And I know it's getting towards the end of the day in Mali and already past the end of the day in Sri Lanka. So this will be an hour conversation, but certainly happy to keep it going online. And I'm sure Nawaz and Doussouba would be happy to connect offline and afterwards too. So with all of that said, with all the formalities done, really, Doussouba, I wanted to give you the floor and share a little bit about the work that Accountability Lab has been doing, and really what was, I think, probably the most comprehensive effort that you've been leading. You and the team have been leading on behalf of the entire community of people affected by changes on the global aid freeze and cuts. So over to you, Doussouba.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, first of all, for having me. I'm really happy to be here and really happy to be part of those important conversations that are about the future of the development aid. I think that those conversations are not only crucial for us actors, but they're also crucial for the community we work with, for the development of our respective countries, and more broadly, just for the global context, the interconnected global context in which we live in. So I think that 2025 has been, I mean, who knew that 2025 would have been like this, really? I think it's end of January has clearly disrupted and undermined some of the system that we have put in place. It's really adding a new layer of difficulty in this ongoing learning process of navigating uncertainty that we're trying to do. And obviously, many of us have been impacted by the stop work notice, followed by the termination letter for the program that we're implementing in our countries. So at Accountability Lab, we saw the urgent need to better understand the new reality we are facing. And this meant really collecting data to understand how other organizations were impacted. It meant deepening our understanding of this impact that is happening and that will continue to happen, and really engaging in a dialogue with key actors to find solution, develop recommendation, and adapt our organization, ourselves, to the new context we are now compelled to operate. So we have done a survey at a global level, sorry. If we can maybe go to the next slide. So we will start seeing the result that came out of it. So 2 weeks after the stop and work, we decided to start with that survey, and we had first 568 organizations that had responded, that were saying that 14,000 of local subgrantee and subcontractor would be impacted as a result of the stop work orders. More than 20% of nonprofit respondents reported at that time that 100% of their budget were impacted.
Say that again. How many said that?
So 20% of all of the respondents saying that they were 100% impacted, that their budget was 100% impacted. We also had, we can see here that, I mean, part of the respondent, we have more than 1,000 survey responses. We had a majority of nonprofit, and some of them were for-profit. But I mean, it just shows how different actors were actually impacted by that new reality. If we can go to the next one. I think here what is really interesting is to see the respondent of the primary offices, the country of the third slide will be the country of operation. But basically, we run that survey for over just a month, and we restarted it last May to measure the impact on organization 3 months after. And a third of respondents were found to be at imminent risk of closure, with Kenya, Nigeria, and the DRC being the most affected countries based on the sample that responded to the survey. So I think that what those surveys are really illustrating is really the multidimensional impact of the situation that is affecting both donors. So a lot of people in the United States have been affected, obviously, but also the recipient countries. And I think that something that is really important to understand here is that those visual represent the visual that are presented reflect only the responses collected through our survey, though we know that it's widely acknowledged that the entire development sector has been affected. See, even though in Asia we don't have some red countries, we know that they have been affected. And we have the pleasure to have Nawaz Mohammed here in the call that will talk about Sri Lanka. So that's quite interesting. And I think that something that I found absolutely important that we're probably all aware of is that it's really important to note that the US government alone account for over 40%. We have different numbers. Sometimes it's 40, 45, 49% of global development aid. So that just show that the concentration, obviously, of one actor just exposed like a structural vulnerability. Because when we have a single actor that holds such a dominant position, obviously the entire system becomes excessively dependent, and really affect or weaken the resilience to political and strategic shift. Because obviously that happened just a few days after the new president took place. If we can go to the next, yeah, please, thank you. So some of the numbers also were absolutely are really worrying in the sense that we have 21% of the respondents that were saying that they only have 1 month of financial resources remaining, while we have 24% report that they're having 3-month financial runaway. And a third of the organizations said that they were at imminent risk of closure, with almost 55% actively seeking or discussing merger or restructuring the organization. So this really highlights the fragility, the dependency of the development sector, unfortunately, which was built and evolved and has evolved around the principle of solidarity. But what we're seeing is that the more time passes, the greater the risk that organization will be forced to shut down is here, and that will definitely negatively impact the community they serve. So that's something that is here and that we have to take in consideration. And that's the reason why we actually decided to do that survey 3 months later to see how the situation is evolving. And unfortunately, it's not for the best. Next, please. Just in terms of, so obviously, yeah, we're talking, when we talk about restructuration, we talk about furlough, we talk about people being laid off. And this is something, if I can talk on a personal level, at Accountability Lab Mali, unfortunately, we had to lay off certain of our staff, a majority of our staff, actually. And I'm sure that this is the case for so many persons that are here in that conversation. Next. So here, those are the themes that are the most impacted, the top affected areas of work based on our respondent was health, gender, human rights, governance, and climate and environment. And we understand why, because a lot of funding were just not, those sectors appear not to be a priority for the government in place. Next. I found this slide really important, and just again, I think it's just another way to reaffirm what I've been saying, but just to show the large majority, whether it's for profit, whether it's non-profit, where we're talking about minimum 85% of people that are of organizations that are saying that they are affected. So I think that those numbers speaks for themselves, really. Next. I think that something also that is really important is to obviously to find some other areas of solution. So one of them is definitely alternative resources. And unfortunately, in those past couple of months, I think it has been really tough for organization to find other alternative resources, because I think that we're just navigating in that uncertainty and trying to find solution. And I think that this is a reality, again, that is not just facing the organization that are on the ground, the organization that are implementing some of the programming, but also the donors. And for us, we have been having a lot of conversation with other donors, whether it's from Canada, from Germany, from European Union. And I think that even for us, it's really just another adaptation that everybody just need to reflect on and see what is going to come, next. Next. So here we can see also the percentage of number of staff that have been laid off or furloughed up to date. The larger percentage, we're talking about more than 101 people in one organization that have been laid off. So we cannot just, it's not that we cannot, we actually can imagine the impact, which is really unfortunate, but that just show how organizations have been largely impacted by those measures. Next. Those are basically some of the quotes that came out of the report, and just showcase again how people have been negatively impacted. So here we're saying thousands of women. Some organizations basically are saying that thousands of women a year depend on us for family planning, 90% being rural poor women. Many who relied on the government healthcare center to get mosquito net will come to us, so we will run out of our separately procured supply of nets. We talk also about HIV positive patients, and staff will have interruption or stoppage of their access to ARVs, and that will be a death sentence for them. Honestly, I think again that sentence speak for itself. Those programs were absolutely life-saving. So being terminated, this is going to have again a negatively effect on that. Next. And I think that another sentence is actually our program have come to a complete stop, including anti-money laundering training of private sector lawyers and accountants from 12 countries. The tremendous momentum we garnered to combat global illicit finance has been lost. So what we have to understand here is that, everything that obviously, I think in those answers, we have humanitarian organization, but we also have a lot of development organization. So when we talk about development, we automatically talk about medium to long-term result or impact. So it's not necessarily things that you will see right away, but those are all of effort that we need to put in place for a certain amount of time to actually get some results. And I think that Accountability Lab, the network itself, is like a perfect example, because we are in the field of changing the norm, changing the habits, changing the attitude of the people so that integrity, accountability can be the norm in civic spaces, in our community. And this is not something that you're not going to see results from day one to day two. And that comes with a lot of reinforcing the capacity of the people that we work with. So yeah, next. So And maybe just before we talk about Malian, because I think that what I'm going to say is actually valid for the Malian ecosystem, but also for the all of the country that have been impacted. But I think that something also that is really important is that responded mentioned the potential breakdown of trust with program participant. This is something that is really important. We that are on the ground, we do a lot of work to actually to build that trust with the people that we work with the community we are serving. And unfortunately, having that stop work from, January 24 to, having to implement that just on the day that we are receiving the notice is definitely has impacted the relationship that we have with program participants. We talk also about disruption to the government ecosystem, economic and psychosocial impact of widespread joblessness, and potential policy-related regression in the field of democracy, governance. Some also mentioned the risk associated with the sudden removal of protection for people working in insecure environments, which is the case, obviously, in Mali. So right now, I'm going to deep dive in for the Mali as well, because we have conducted a similar survey to understand the impact on the ecosystem, but also as a way to engage with other actors to reinforce our resilience as a system and as actor of development. So first of all, before I talk about the number that is on the screen, just so you know, in total in Mali, we had 317 million in funding that was canceled, including 268 million that has already been committed. So those numbers are coming from all of the funding that were coming from the USAID or the US Embassy, for example. So the abrupt disruption has directly impacted the capacity of Malian organization to carry out their mission, reduce income for local businesses providing service to NGOs. And I think that just a clear link between the for-profit, non-profit, and that just shows how that ecosystem was touching so many different actors, not just NGOs, not just a civil society organization, but also business. And it has altered numerous essential field initiatives, leaving beneficiary population without support. So the impact on organizational budget is significant, as we see on the screen. The majority of the respondents have seen over 90% of their budget affected, while others are facing reduction between 51% and 80%. Those are huge numbers. And I think that specifically in the context of Mali, this situation is largely due to the political context in Mali. Mali is in a quite unique situation due to the political context. We have been experiencing over the past 5 years with a transitional government led by the military following a coup d'etat in 2020. Not to mention the ongoing security crisis marked by the presence of armed group that have been terrorizing the community since 2012. So this political environment has led many actors to actually end their collaboration with the actual government, with some even being expelled. So before that suspension with the American government, let's keep in mind that France has been expelled, the MINUSMA has been expelled, and we also have the Nordic countries such as Denmark, Norway, Sweden, who actually left Mali because of the political context. So it just showed that not only we have a strong, it shows that, first of all, there's a lot of actors that left, but it's also showed that Mali had a strong reliance on US government funding. Next. We have several numbers here, again, just to highlight the difficult financial situation we are. So we're talking about 70% of respondents organization report having no remaining financial resource and now face a critical situation. 16% report having very limited autonomy, with operating reserve lasting no more than 3 months. And 4% of respondents said that they could not cover the expense between 4 and 6 months. So we clearly not in like a medium long-term sustainability for sure. Next. Here, I think that those numbers are actually really interesting because what I see here is that the majority of respondents suffered an impact of over 1 million. Some of them are saying between 100,000, between 5. Some others are saying between 25K to 100K. So that just show again the reliance that we had on the US government funding. Next. Same thing, we did also a thematic area most affected. So obviously here in Mali, it's really governance, human rights, education, health, peace, and security, with a country that is facing a security crisis since 2012, sorry. The freedom of press, also entrepreneurship, livelihood. Freedom of press is something that is really important as well. In a country where there's a crisis, what we have noticed is really the shrinking of the civil space. So there were actually a lot of action that was being made toward that, including Accountability Lab with some other actors such as PACT, Code for Africa, and Open Data. Next. Again, really just to showcase the repercussion on the workforce and how organizations have been forced to basically reduce or suspend their staff, and unfortunately, some of them have already closed their organization. Next. Those also are important numbers, and I think that they're really when we talk about 5,000, 10,000 people that are being affected, I think that those really reflect on organizations that serve, or humanitarian organization that serve a lot of people on the ground in the northern part center, where a dynamic that we have seen in Mali is IDPs. So we have a lot of internally displaced people within the country that were being served through those amazing programs. Next. So something that I'm really proud of, the team, because I think that I've been mentioning a lot of numbers that are really alarming, and let's be real, it's really depressing as well, honestly. But I think that it's all of that is really to build on the resilience of the organization. It's really to engage in a conversation to see what can we do next, because this is not the first crisis that we're facing. This is definitely a major one, but I think that just a few years ago with the COVID-19 also we have faced something that was absolutely life-changing for the world just in general. And for us, it was really important to have a report that have recommendation. And those are the type of recommendation that came out from some of the respondents and from the brainstorming that we had within our organization and within the translocal network. So I think that those are really important, and this is definitely something that we need to reflect on and try to see how we can really deep dive and put them in place. And I think that obviously we definitely want to diversify the funding, because I mean the work still needs to be done. People are still in need. The conflict is still ongoing, so the work needs to be done. And I think that there's other actors that are stepping in, and there is definitely something that we need to take a look at is really develop the partnership with private foundation and companies to have a more stable funding. I think that we need to explore opportunities for participatory funding, to involve citizens, obviously, and the diaspora directly. Mali has a large diaspora, especially in Europe. And if we take a look at the numbers, the remittance that we are receiving from the diaspora is higher than the entire amount that we're receiving from all of the different donors. So there's definitely something that we can tap into. And I'm probably sure that we will talk about it a little bit later in the conversation. But there's 8 recommendations that we have in our report that is in French. But thank God nowadays there is a lot of translation websites. So I would be happy to share the report also that we have done for Mali. Next. And I think it's actually the end. So I'm going to stop right here. Thank you so much for your attention and yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Doussouba. And thank you really to Accountability Lab. I hadn't realized that you were all personally affected as well by the stop work orders and all these changes. And so it's such a testament, I think, to the work that you all are doing at the Accountability Lab to document at the same time as navigating your own challenges, documenting and producing what's really a public good. And I would encourage everyone here to take a moment to go to the full website to download the data. For those who are in civil society, I would encourage you to continue to contribute. You've already documented, and the numbers are striking, 1,000 responses representing more than 14,000 organizations, community-based organizations, vendors, small groups that are going to be affected. And here, where there's sometimes an impression that this is something that's felt in Washington, but not felt around the world. I really appreciate you putting this together, and I hope everyone does really sit with that data and use it. Those of us in Washington also use it, share it. It deserves a really wide readership and engagement, and it is that public good that you guys have made available to all of us. So thank you so much for that and for the deep dive on Mali. I have 1 or 2 questions. There is like a question thing here, so feel free to ask questions directly to us or in the chat. You can also use the raise hand. But first, I wanted to come to you, Nawaz, to give us a different picture. One of the things that stood out to me from Doussouba's presentation was talking about sort of the way IDPs in Mali were being cut off. The degree to which health here in Washington is perhaps what's most discussed in the newspapers, if anything is discussed around the aid cuts, yet that was just really quite a relatively small box of all of the effects, significant, but still relatively small of all the effects being documented. So Nawaz, from where you sit in Sri Lanka, tell us a little bit about the context, what you're seeing, and especially where you're seeing the effect of conflict governance or sort of the non-health assistance being felt in Sri Lanka. So over to you, Nawaz.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, and thanks, Doussouba, for excellent presentation. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So Sri Lanka, for those who are not very familiar with, is a country that had 2 violent resurrections since 90s, with a 30-year civil war that ended, in 2009. So it's a post-war, post-violent country context with a lot of culture of violence and significant impact in terms of disappearances, impunity, and the needs for post-war reconciliation and so on one hand. On the other hand, Sri Lanka was also a country that was grappling with prolonged governance crisis, repeatedly, ruled by autocratic and corrupt, parties and governments, and then thirdly, Sri Lanka faced an acute economic crisis since 2020 until 24, and is trying to come out now. So it is in this background. In 2024, late last year, there was a new government elected. It's totally a new government, a party that have received only less than 5% of votes nationally prior to this situation, was elected as the government, the president and the government. And this also happened in the wake of a very intense and a very active civil uprising called People's Struggle, Jana Ragalaya in 23, which thrown the previous government and president out of power. So it is in this context, it's kind of this three things, the kind of violent conflict and peace and reconciliation aspect, the governance crisis, and an economic crisis. So there was this new government which was elected for the first time by communities across the different ethnic religious groups. And so there was a lot of hope. And this government was also on a clear mandate for anti-corruption and good governance and economic reform and so on. So early 2025, there was real hope, a lot of hope, and especially for people like me in the civil society who have dedicated all my career and life, more than 20 years, working to see a change, a positive change in Sri Lanka, despite having many opportunities to work at regional or global level. But we stayed and we hoped for a better change. But unfortunately, one fine evening, we all received this message about this aid post by U.S. government, which has impacted on real critical pieces of work by civil society NGOs here. So I'll highlight a few examples, and then we can go into questions, discussions. Two demining organizations have to lay off 1,000 people. All of them were disabled or deserters from the former combatant groups. Overnight, this has to happen. The second one was the government, the new government, with a lot of enthusiasm, with excellent partnership with the civil society for the first time, developed a national action plan on peace and reconciliation, which had to, really, halt and shelved. The third one, Sri Lanka is well known, and those who are familiar in the human rights and other circles and the reconciliation circles know we have serious cases of, like kind of accountability, truth and justice related aspects. We are number two in terms of, index for disappearances globally, right? So there was critical justice sector support provided by U.S. government, which was, really kind of, starting to shape up and progressing, and that has to come to a halt overnight. And personally, for me and our organization, Search for Common Ground, we have been a very, kind of like a constructive, a productive partner and a contributor in this context on these aspects. And we had to, cut several of our programs overnight, which has impacted in, reducing our team by 2/3. And even the 1/3 that remaining, including myself, is working on a part-time, like a limited LOE basis even now. And it is kind of the context that Sri Lanka is in. And important to note that Sri Lanka was just coming out of the economic crisis and on a IMF package. And Sri Lanka was also a country where most of the Scandinavian countries have already phased out in terms of their kind of proactive development contribution. So it is in that kind of a broader context. And one final point in terms of context, Sri Lanka is also strategically located in terms of Indo-Pacific security ring and geopolitics in the Indo-Pacific region, which is very susceptible for extremism and security risks on multiple fronts. And an example of that was what is known as an Easter Sunday attack in 2019, which was implied to the involvement of international kind of terrorist groups, but targeting, like international tourists and so on in the capital of Colombo, right? So it is in this broader, kind of security, economic crisis and governance context, Sri Lanka's, the impact of the aid cut happened in Sri Lanka. And it's not just the US aid cut. The further implication of the US aid cut on other donors and their decisions and the way they are looking at their engagement is also contributing to it in the Sri Lankan context. I'll just stop there and happy to answer going forward any questions.
Thanks so much, Nawaz. And I think it's quite easy to imagine how telling thousands of people to stop removing landmines in a country as the second highest number of people forced disappeared, in a context of very recent terrorist attacks on churches and in a geostrategic location, how that would be profoundly destabilizing, not only for all of the civil society, but for the wider country as it navigates a really tough moment. Maybe please do, for those in chats, please do raise your hand or put in a question. Also, for those who are struggling with sound, if you click more on the Zoom, there's a closed caption option. Like if you want to follow along on your phone. I want to come to you, Doussouba, though. First, I'll ask, for a sector that was so weak and so reliant on foreign government support in Mali, and in many places. How would you respond to people who would say, well, this proves that civil society was a colonial enterprise, and NGOs are bought and paid by the US government or by other foreign governments, that it shows really that the sector wasn't valuable to those countries because the people of those countries weren't resourcing them. And if it all goes when the US goes or when, as you were saying, the Scandinavians or other goes, that maybe the enterprise wasn't worthwhile. In the first place, and maybe not worth saving. How would you respond? I'm sure you hear that from different actors. And we hear that here in Washington, maybe also from folks in the Washington. I know in different African countries that also comes up. So how would you respond to someone who's sort of thinking along those lines? You're on mute as well.
Sorry, yeah, thank you so much. And this is actually a really interesting question. I think that what I see, and again, I'm going to talk about Mali, what I see here in the ground, but I think that we were already witnessing we are, I think, witnessing an unraveling of an already fragile civil society organization. A lot of people might say that some of the agenda is actually coming from elsewhere, but I'm on the ground and I see the amazing work, the extraordinary work that some of the organizations are doing. But I think that for me, what is the most important is the impact that is having on the community that are now being left behind. I'm just going to give one specific example, again, in the context of the conflict that we are facing. We talk a lot about violent extremism, and I don't think that one country in the world is actually free from that, because this is really a new way of attacking or violating some countries. I think that the actual situation actually increased the risk of further marginalization in fragile context like Mali, which can rise. Which can translate into a rise of violent extremism. And we have data that shows that many individuals actually join extremist group not just by conviction, but due to a lack of opportunity. And unfortunately, I think that can manifest in more attacks, more like increased violence, greater impunity, greater injustice, and everything that is actually opposite to peace, basically. So this is something that we see here in Mali, But we know, and that's what I mentioned in the beginning, that we are all evolving in an interconnected context. What is happening here in Mali has an impact in Niger, in Burkina Faso. It has an impact in all of the littoral countries also in Africa. And I think that it has also an impact on even more than that. So I think that those issues should not actually be taken on like an individual, just in one country, but really at a global level, because unfortunately it has an impact on everything. So for example, again, in Mali also, we know, I was talking about the diaspora. So yes, obviously we can talk about the brain drain. And I think that that situation might actually accentuate the brain drain. But we know that we have people that are educated, that are living because of lack of opportunity, or because they want to have something different. They want to offer themselves like a better well-being, if I can put it like this. But at the same time, the fact that we have all of those consequences, and again, I'm talking about violent extremism, greater impunity, injustice, the absence of peace. This is also going to reinforce the illegal immigration. And that illegal immigration is going where? Obviously, it's going to go to other countries, because the migration is much more, we have much more immigration in the neighbor country, but it also goes to, for example, to Europe. So that's why I believe that those questions should not be taken as this is your issues, and you have to deal on your own. But this is really, it should be seen as like a global agenda. And this is actually, I think, the global system that have been put in place. Obviously, is it perfect? No. Do I think that the situation where we are right now is maybe an opportunity to do things better? Yeah, definitely. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So I'll just quickly answer that question, Mike.
To do,
I'll
Nawaz,
kind of,
and as you do, Nawaz, please answer that question and also incorporate. We had a question also on the feedback about what does this mean for the security of local residents. Ali Toure asked not only sort of what does it mean globally, but what does
sure.
it mean for an
Yeah.
ordinary Sri Lankan security and safety?
No, exactly. So the 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 Peace and Reconciliation National Action Plan that I mentioned include several mechanisms, institutions that were set up to support post-war reconciliation. And one of the mechanisms is Office for Missing Persons, OMP, which has an element in terms of also witness protection and all of that. And this is in a context where the military is being known for, its notorious, act in terms of, civilian security, kind of, all this, the kind of missing persons and kidnapping and all of that. So the families are really scared of, both for their personal security, but also in terms of, witnesses and so on. So these are like, even though it's kind of not directly is supporting the resident in terms of their security more directly, but like all of these have an implication, an impact in terms of how confident, how safe people can feel to participate and to contribute to these things while their security is at risk. So we have had like records and records of how the families of the disappeared were threatened, how the witnesses' families were threatened. And for those who are familiar with Sri Lanka, there's a resolution against Sri Lanka in Geneva Human Rights Council, and most of those were along these lines. So it is in that context that, and I'll also share another example which is much more global. Sri Lanka was also noted as a transit point for Maldivians moving to join some of the, kind of international kind of, extremist groups and so on. So the kind of governance, immigration, border control, capacity and strengthening that was happening in Sri Lanka to support, to address this both in the Indo-Pacific region, but also in a global context from a security and extremism perspective was also a direct impact, I would argue.
Thanks. I think that's incredibly helpful. I think to hear, and I know we also got some comments in the chat, and one of the observations that I think Ina shared was that it's all very well and good to say development must be more effective or to cut aid, but when that's not matched to work opportunities, when it's not in any meaningful or serious way linked to growth of other forms of economy and local resources, that it undermines and isn't likely to result in anything meaningfully positive. Putting words in your mouth, Ina, but you shared it to panelists. And I thought it was worth it. I wanted to share it to the group as well. Maybe as we wrap up, Doussouba and Nawaz, I want to maybe give you words for a final thought. I think for everyone here, so we have groups of people who are funders in the U.S. and other governments and philanthropy. We have civic groups around the world who are joining. What would be your advice? Like, what do you want? How could people help you? Or help in this enterprise if people are seeing this and feeling a little bit powerless, or funders are looking and saying, look, well, here in the US, we're just never going to have the amount of resources that we used to dedicate, or Europe, we don't have the ability to match those, or civic groups who are calling in and feeling the effects themselves, ordinary American citizens who are seeing this happening but don't know what to do. What would be your advice, Doussouba, for those of us on the call and those who will be watching online? What should people be doing in this moment based on the really chilling, the chilling picture, but also some of the hopes that you alluded to? So Doussouba, I'd be very curious, and then Nawaz will come to you also for a final thought.
Yeah, thank you for that great question. I think that's something that is really that people need to know is that as, for example, Accountability Lab and probably Search for Common Ground, I think that we describe ourselves as grassroots organization. So what does it mean is that one of our strengths is to be able to intervene in a fragile context, being in contact with the community. So I think that agility and adaptation is already part of our DNA, if I can put it like this, in a way. And I think that we need to really reinforce the strength of local organization, because we do have access to this community. I'm not blaming anyone here, but I'm just going to give an example. But for example, there's a lot of organization, for example, who will have their meeting in a big hotel in the city. So for example, I don't necessarily say that we don't do from time to time, but we actually, as a grassroots organization, we go underground, we meet them, we discuss with them, we assess their need. So meaning that we are able to do a lot with less. And I think that this is one of the strengths of grassroots, of local organization. And this is how we are able to find locally led solution. And I think that this is really something that is really important and that people need to think about. And I think that in that same area, I think that I saw that on DevX not too long ago, but there is a report that has been published that is called Too Southern to be Funded. So, and it was published by the Shift the Power movement. So it's really basically, there are some numbers that say that it found that almost 63% of funding went to countries' own civil society organization, while just under 29% went to civil society in other global South countries. So I think that the development aid sector we need to make sure that some people will call it localization. We call that locally led solution. It needs to be really real. It needs to be real. We need to really empower and making sure that the organizations that are on the ground, that can do absolutely amazing things can really be reinforced and be supported the right way, so that we can have more impact, so that we can have tangible results. So I think that this is really important, and for me, that kind of I think I put that in that decolonizing the sector of aid thoughts or reflection that we need to have to make sure that we can be more impactful, because the aid is something that is supposed to be temporary. It's not something that should be that it shouldn't be forever, basically. So I think that we really need an aid that lifts people up, and not that reinforce the power imbalance and deepen our dependency. And I think that having, receiving notice of stop work or termination where you have to take decision overnight, that unfortunately reinforce that power imbalance that exists between the different actors in that sector. So yeah, I'm going to stop here. So much to say, but I'm going to stop here.
Okay, so thanks for that reminder too, that sort of, $1 well spent is worth more than $5 poorly spent, and the call to be much more efficient and localized and effective. And I think that also showed up was your organizations that responded to your survey. I also highlighted how they were adapting, how they were seeking mergers, alliances, working together in different kinds of ways. Maybe over to you, Nawaz. What sort of advice would you have for the folks here on the call who want to make a difference, whether for Sri Lanka or more widely?
Yeah. So I'll be brief. First one, I think those of you are on the call, I think, and everyone else who could, keep the work and the pressure on the U.S. government and Congress, please keep it for any improvement, any change, and any adjustments to the U.S. policy. It's not just about funding. It's more than funding. So, for example, the resolution against Sri Lanka in Geneva was actually initially co-sponsored by US, which was a huge strength for civil society and people to really be able to keep the reconciliation on the agenda with the government. And the second request is actually, as the survey finding highlighted, the critical funding gap for most civil society across, in Sri Lanka, in Mali, in other places, are actually like 6 to 24 months, like in the kind of the short to medium term, right? So, stepping up of kind of individual donors, the foundations, and kind of working outside the normal way of working, and doing things differently and stepping up in a different way is critical to bridge that. And I'll end with this as to why I'm saying that. I told you that we reduced our team by 2/3 in the last like just few months, and my heart is melting and was melting when I see some of our best talents that we developed over, like in our case, we developed over 15 years. And we also had like very little retention in our team, despite, massive offers by UN and US contractors and all of that. So these staff, like without real desire, is moving. And my problem is not them moving. My problem is actually they are moving out of the development sector as a whole. They're actually moving to find a job. Because also in the context of, we are just coming out of an economic crisis and all of that. So I think it's important. So my request is twofold. One is any government, including US government, please keep up the kind of the pressure and the negotiation to, like improve even a bit from where they are now. Second is the individual donors and foundations to rethink the way you are already working and to, like kind of really change and, step in to kind of, fill this urgent vacuum that's really is going to be changing the whole fabric, the whole face of the development sector in terms of human resources and capacity and talent, with kind of people with kind of the real passion and who really want to make a difference in people's lives and the global situation.
Thank you so much. I mean, and on that note, the focus that this is about delivering change for people, but it's also led by people, the enormous majority of whom are not, and the increasing majority of whom are not in Washington or elsewhere is a very good note to end on. For those who want to keep connected, please do. Globalaidfreeze.com is the study from the Accountability Lab. Please share that widely. Please also share the recording of this webinar with your networks and with others who are eager to learn more about the issue. And then finally, I'd say follow the Accountability Lab and sfcg.org on social media. Sign up for the mailing lists and newsletters to know when upcoming events are going to be happening. Please stay involved as all of us navigate this together. I don't think there's one person on this call or who'll be watching this who isn't necessarily in one way or another personally affected and doing the best that they can to support these efforts around the world. So thank you so much for starting the day in Washington, for ending the day in Sri Lanka, and being somewhere in the middle in Mali, and deep thanks to everyone as we keep connected together. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.